Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Munman Bhattacharya. Coming up in the next hour, US Vice President Kamala Harris announces $1.5 billion in Ukraine aid at the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland. Ahead of French legislative polls, thousands gather in Paris to protest against far-right national rallies surge in the European elections. India formally starts cost negotiations with the French delegation for procurement of 26 Rafale marine aircraft for the Indian Navy. And the 18th edition of the Mumbai International Film Festival kicks off. 7-day extravaganza features documentaries, short fiction and animation films. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi described his visit to the G7 summit as productive. There were fruitful dialogues on key global issues under the G7 platform. PM addressed the outreach session of the G7 summit, and the next report tells you more about Prime Minister's visit and G7 leaders' communique.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi concluded his day-long visit to Italy. In a social media post, the Prime Minister described the visit as productive and said it was an important G7 summit where he presented India's perspective at the world stage. He highlighted that the discussions were held with world leaders on various subjects. He further expressed a shared commitment to create impactful solutions that benefit the global community and create a better world for future generations. India's Ministry of External Affairs said this visit saw fruitful dialogues on key global issues under the G7 platform and the deepening of India's partnership with countries participating in the summit. During his visit, the Prime Minister attended the G7 summit and held bilaterals with several world leaders, including his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Addressing the outreach session at the G7 summit in Apulia, Italy, PM Modi elaborated on India's energy transition pathway, noting that its approach was based on availability, accessibility, affordability and acceptability. PM mentioned that India was working towards achieving the target of net zero emissions by 2070. Talking of India's AI mission premised on AI for all, Prime Minister emphasized that this technology should be aimed at fostering progress and well-being of all. He underlined that India was fostering international collaboration as a founding member of Global Partnership for AI. The leaders of the Group of Seven issued a communique called the Apulia G7 Leaders Communique after the G7 summit concluded in Italy on Friday. The leaders reiterated their support for Ukraine, stepping up support to African countries and commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific based on the rule of law. The leaders reiterated their determination to address the triple global crisis of climate change, pollution and biodiversity loss. Bureau Report, DD India.
Meanwhile, the official spokesperson of India's Ministry of External Affairs, Randhir Jaiswal, shared a video on his social media post on X outlining the highlights of PM's visit to Italy for the G7 summit. Take a listen. Now we are joined by Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya. He is former secretary with the Ministry of External Affairs. Ambassador, such a pleasure to have you on DD India. If we see geopolitically, then the G7 summit began with focus on Russia and rounded off with a warning to China. Did you see that coming?
Yes, of course. I think what the G7 does is not only discuss the financial stability issues, but major geopolitical issues. And it has been quite evident for some time that the focus of the OECD Western countries has primarily been not only on what's going on in Ukraine, and of course, as you know, the president of Ukraine was invited to this particular meeting specially. And of course, there are great concerns about what's happening in East Asia, particularly with China. So in a sense, it was not unanticipated. But I think what we did at that meeting also reflects many of our issues of interest and concern.
Absolutely, and one of them was AI. So G7 leaders committed to manage artificial intelligence. How do you see that unfolding?
I think the Prime Minister's participation at the G7 and the outreach session highlighted three key issues. The first one was obviously on technology, because we've all realized that technology, apart from being a huge opportunity which can help you leapfrog the stages of development, which can make it more inclusive and can help you to gain into the digital platforms much more effectively, also has certain challenges. And I think Prime Minister highlighted that particular aspect and about India's participation in the global partnership for AI in that context. Similarly, on energy transition, another issue that is a corollary in a sense of the climate change discussions, Prime Minister highlighted the need to have the transition done in a smooth manner, and also to be cognizant of what the developing country or global south interests and concerns are, so that it is affordable at the same time. And he also outlined how we are making progress, which can be an example for many others, because as we know, many countries in Europe have fallen behind in meeting their targets. And I think the third issue, which was of great interest, and that is the geopolitical one, which was the salience of the growth of the global south and the importance of the Indo-Pacific. And I think particularly in the context of the latter, we see the significance of what we need to do with China also coming up.
Yes, on the China question, we've seen that there was an agreement on how to deal with China vis-a-vis its infrastructure projects, for instance. Also, the China's electric vehicle industry and the various economic means that it uses for dominance. So do you see that unfolding in a manner that there will be a strong pitch going forward from the European countries, including all the Western countries, against China? Do you expect that pressure to further build on China in the days to come?
Well, as you have seen that over the last few years, there has been a growing awareness of the kind of expansion that Chinese economy, particularly in the manufacturing sector, has had in terms of its impact on the rest of the world. And essentially what has happened is that a certain level of overcapacity in the Chinese economy has led to a lowering of prices. A lot of this has been provided by subsidies in the Chinese system, and therefore economies across the world have been affected, and many of the industries have been very badly hit. This issue of overcapacity pertains not only to the old mature industries, which would include the original combustion engine vehicles as well, but also includes the new industries of high technology industries in which the growth rate and the potential is much higher. And this would include things like semiconductors and, as you mentioned, the EVs that China has got great access, particularly in the storage devices and batteries. So I think there is a certain degree of concern that this kind of dominance, because what that does is that it not only has a certain disruptive element in terms of what happens to the value and supply chains and the reliability and the resilience of these structures, but also it has a damaging effect on the industry structure of various other countries. And therefore, although we are all part of the WTO, we need to have much more deliberate and focused discussions on how we deal with this overcapacity issue. And as you know, that in the past, there has been a certain move towards having some of the investments move out of China so that we can have more reliable supply chains. And I think that tendency will continue. But the critical element will be how technology is managed so that it becomes more equitable. And this is what was reflected also in Prime Minister's remarks when he talked about AI.
Yes. Building on that, what we understand is that the challenge in the AI domain is that there are different regulatory processes or various types of regulation in different countries around the world. The Prime Minister has been speaking about a human-centric approach towards development, towards technology as well. He's spoken about AI for all. Then we've heard from Pope Francis, who spoke on AI ethics at one of the sessions in G7. Where do you see this headed? Do you expect going forward a unified approach towards artificial intelligence? Also, is that easier said than done?
I think you're absolutely right that there is need for greater collaborative effort. There is a lot of work that is going on, particularly in the multilateral context. As you realize, this is something in which we will need the collaboration not only of the states or the governments of the different countries, but also the industry will have to be involved, because this is an area in which the developments are happening at a very rapid pace. And when rapid development takes place in technology and new innovations come in almost every day, it is very difficult to construct a policy framework which can account for all those things that might come up. So I think we will need some more collaborative efforts involving the industry as well, so that all the stakeholders are on the table. There is a process that is ongoing, which is under the UN ambit on the data governance issue, but this is something that will go deeper. And I think there is a lot of interest among some of the countries, including the Chinese and the Americans, to see that we can have a more collaborative effort so that the rulemaking becomes more clear. For those who are at a position of advantage or lead, so to say, on artificial intelligence, they would like a more liberal regime so that they can also reap the benefits or the profits, if I may say, of the AI revolution. But at the same time, it has to have a certain human touch, so that we do not lose touch with the reality and the objectiveness of such processes, and that human interest is always kept at the center. So this balance, which will also include how we deal with the ethics of it, will also become very important. I am optimistic that at the end of the day, we will find a balance, because at the end, we will see that the states and the corporates will actually have to work together so that the mechanisms happen. Some progress, as you know, has been made in terms of our own AI approach. The European Union has made certain progress. The Chinese have made great advances in this area. And I think combining all this towards something that is for common good will take us in the right direction.
Ambassador, what stood out to you in the bilateral meetings and pull-asides of PM Modi in Italy? We saw a light melody moment as well, shared by PM Modi and PM Meloni, that was posted on the X account of the Italian Prime Minister.
So, of course, Italy has a very special relationship with India. And we've seen this happen in the past. It's a very unique relationship that we have with Italy, which is one of our larger trading partners. And also, as we move ahead, when we look at ideas like how we expand supply chains and how we have connections from India through the Middle East into the European continent, we will see that Italy and its ports and its industries will play a very, very leading role. And so Italy is a very important partner, and there is a certain warmth in that relationship which will take us in that direction. Equally important, I think, were two other bilaterals that Prime Minister had, the ones with the French and the British. With the British, as you know, they're moving into elections, but we have a very key FTA negotiation with them, and we hope that we will be able to make significant movement on that, because that will give us a certain toehold into that particular sector. With the French, we have a much more diversified partnership, including in high technology, defense, nuclear, and so on. And I think Prime Minister's discussions with President Macron on that were very, very important, I would say.
We leave it at that. Ambassador Bhattacharya, pleasure to have you on the show on the G7 summit. Still to come on DD India News Hour. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa re-elected for a second term after a dramatic late coalition deal. France, Germany and Britain condemn Iran's steps to expand its nuclear program. And the Turkish Defense Ministry says 17 Kurdish militants neutralized in northern Iraq and Syria.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour with me, Munmun Bhattacharya. Demonstrations are underway in Paris and cities across France on Saturday to protest against the far-right national rally ahead of upcoming elections to the French Parliament. Following the national rally's surge in last Sunday's European elections, police said 350,000 people are expected to march and 21,000 officers had been mobilized after labor unions, student groups and rights groups called for rallies to oppose the anti-immigration Eurosceptic party. At least 150 marches are expected in cities including Marseille, Toulouse, Lyon and Lille. Sweden and Iran on Saturday carried out a prisoner exchange, with Sweden freeing a former Iranian official, Hamid Nouri, convicted for his role in a mass execution in the 1980s. Meanwhile, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said in a statement that Swedish citizens Johan Folderus and Said Azizi, who had been detained in Iran, were on a plane back to Sweden. The prisoner swap was mediated by Oman. South Africa's newly re-elected President Cyril Ramaphosa awaits swearing in next week, following 2 weeks of intensive behind-the-scenes talks with other parties regarding a government of national unity. The agreement to form a coalition has allowed ANC leader Cyril Ramaphosa to remain the president, but marks an end to the 3 decades of outright ANC dominance in the South African government. DD India's Isaac Lucando has more.
President Cyril Ramaphosa was re-elected by fellow MPs with 283 votes in a secret ballot. He will be sworn in next week in Pretoria and unveil his new cabinet. Ramaphosa, a former trade unionist turned millionaire businessman, will lead a government that includes diverse political perspectives. The ANC, historically a Pan-Africanist progressive party of the left, has implemented welfare and economic empowerment programs for poor black South Africans. The DA, the largest coalition party, advocates a liberal free market agenda. Smaller parties spanning from left to far right are also set to join the government. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula has stated that its intended government of national unity includes a majority of the 18 parties represented in the 400-seat National Assembly. South Africa's BRICS partner, China, has welcomed Ramaphosa's re-election, with President Xi Jinping sending a congratulatory note. Isaac Lucando in Dar es Salaam, reporting for DD India.
France, Germany and Britain on Saturday condemned Iran's latest steps to further expand its nuclear program. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has taken further steps towards sabotaging the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action signed with Iran in 2015. The IAEA said that Iran started operating dozens of additional advanced centrifuges at the Natanz enrichment site and has announced that it will install thousands more of centrifuges at both its Fordo and Natanz sites. Turkish forces have killed 17 militants of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party and the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia in northern Iraq and northern Syria. That's what the Defense Ministry said on Saturday in a social media post. The PKK, which has been waging an insurgency against the Turkish state since 1984, is designated a terrorist organization by Turkey, the United States and the European Union. Turkey's cross-border attacks into northern Iraq have been a source of tension with its southeastern neighbor for years. US President Joe Biden will attend a glitzy fundraiser in Los Angeles on Saturday with top Hollywood celebrities and former President Barack Obama that has raised $28 million amid Democratic anxiety over opponent Donald Trump's growing fundraising clout. Late-night TV host Jimmy Kimmel will interview Biden and Obama, and Hollywood celebrities George Clooney and Julia Roberts are guests in the latest star-studded event. Biden's campaign hopes shows strength and momentum despite Biden's low approval ratings and concerns about his age. A Biden campaign spokeswoman said, and I quote, $28 million heading into President Biden's LA fundraiser and counting. This is the largest Democratic fundraiser in history. Campaign officials said the Biden campaign outraised the $26 million a March fundraiser in New York City, generated where Stephen Colbert hosted Biden, Obama and Bill Clinton. Japan's Prime Minister reaffirmed his country's support for Ukraine on Saturday following the close of the G7 summit in Italy. Fumio Kishida reiterated the view that Ukraine today could be East Asia tomorrow, saying that Japan was considering further sanctions against Chinese organizations thought to be supplying Russia's military. A draft of the G7 leaders' statement released at the end of the summit included a pledge, in fact, to take action against Chinese financial institutions that help Russia obtain weaponry for its war against Ukraine. Kishida spoke to reporters in Italy shortly before boarding a flight to Switzerland, where he is scheduled to attend a summit aimed at sketching out a path to ending the war in Ukraine. China's Premier Li Qiang arrived in Adelaide on Saturday for the highest-level Chinese visit to Australia in 7 years. Upon his arrival, Li was welcomed by Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong and South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas. As China remains Australia's largest trading partner, the purpose of Li's visit is to enhance both trade and diplomatic relations between the two countries. While in his address, Premier Li remarked that bilateral relations have resumed in a positive direction. The annual Hajj pilgrimage reached its zenith with the day of Arafat, when millions of Muslims from across the globe gathered at the plains of Mount Arafat on the outskirts of Makkah. All 1.7 million pilgrims from India joined the masses who descended on the sandy grounds after spending the previous night in the nearby tent city of Mina. The pilgrims remained on the plains until sunset, spending the day in fervent prayers and rituals central to the Hajj. Both Indian Hajj mission officials and Saudi Arabian authorities have made extensive arrangements to facilitate the movements of pilgrims.
Arafat, this is the most crucial day for the Hajj. Today, every pilgrim from all across the world move from the tent city of Mina to the plains of Arafat, and everyone spends the entire day here till the sunset in prayers. After the sunset, all the pilgrims will move to Muzdalifah, and tomorrow morning they will return back to Mina. These 5 days of the Hajj are the core Hajj period and the most crucial part of the Hajj.
Huge tailbacks are reported from highways leading out of Dhaka to celebrate Eid ul-Adha festival in their hometowns. Bangladesh will celebrate Eid on the 17th of June. Various stretches of the highway reported long queues of vehicles up to 10 kilometers leaving Dhaka. Media report says that private buses and transport services are overcharging passengers, forcing many less affluent individuals to travel on trolleys and trucks. Let's now take a look at some other stories making news around the world. Beachgoers in Singapore's island were surprised to find oil spill spread to the shores of favourite beaches on Saturday. The authorities have since closed and cordoned off the island's oil slick-ridden beaches. The oil spill spread to shore after Netherlands flagged dredger hit a stationary Singapore flagged bunker vessel on Friday. A body has been recovered by the search team looking for 2 Japanese climbers who are missing in Pakistan. The civil administration in northern Pakistan confirmed on Saturday. The climbers were reported missing on Wednesday while climbing Spantic Peak, which stands at 7,027 meters above sea level. Parts of southern China were affected by floods following torrential rainfall. Visuals from state broadcaster shows traffic in floodwater and rescuers evacuating residents to safety in Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Heavy flooding was also seen in Zhejiang province. Still to come on DD India News Hour, analysis on the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland. High-level US delegation set to travel to India next week. Preparations begin in the run-up to International Yoga Day on 21st June.
Welcome to Jaipur.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour with me, Munmun Bhattacharya. US Vice President Kamala Harris has announced $1.5 billion in Ukraine aid at the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland. Ahead of French legislative snap polls, thousands gather in Paris to protest against far-right national rallies surge in European elections. And the 18th edition of the Mumbai International Film Festival kicks off. 7-day extravaganza features documentaries, short fiction and animation films. The 2-day Ukraine Peace Summit commenced in Switzerland on Saturday, aiming to pave the way towards peace between Ukraine and Russia. With over 100 countries and organizations in attendance, the summit is poised to be a significant event in the quest for resolution. Here's more on this developing story.
The Ukraine Peace Summit began in Switzerland on Saturday, drawing attendance from over 100 countries and organizations dedicated to charting a path to peace between Ukraine and Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky opened the summit with a powerful declaration stating that the event would be historic in its significance.
The views, ideas, and leadership of each nation are equally important to us. And everything that will be agreed upon at the summit today will be part of the peacemaking process that we all need. I believe that we will witness history being made here at the summit.
Among the notable attendees, US Vice President Kamala Harris announced substantial support for Ukraine, pledging over $1.5 billion in aid. This assistance will focus on bolstering Ukraine's energy sector and addressing the humanitarian crisis stemming from the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
I am here in Switzerland to stand with Ukraine and the leaders from around the world in support of a just and lasting peace. As we look forward to that peace and work toward that, the United States is committed to helping Ukraine rebuild. To that end, today, I am pleased to announce that the United States will provide more than $1.5 billion to address Ukraine's humanitarian and energy needs.
In a significant development earlier this week, India confirmed its participation in the peace summit at an appropriate level, signaling its support for the peace process. Meanwhile, on Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin outlined his conditions for initiating peace talks with Ukraine. However, Ukraine dismissed these conditions, asserting that they were not a serious effort towards peace and held no relevance to the ongoing negotiations. As the summit progresses, the international community watches with bated breath, hoping for a breakthrough that could bring an end to the conflict and restore peace to the region. With Bureau Inputs, Amish Mahajan's report for DD India.
And DD India's correspondent Dasha Chernyshova is live now from Moscow. Dasha, what do you make of the attendance at the summit in Switzerland?
Well, certainly the number of countries that are participating in the peace conference in Switzerland is telling how much the world is interested in finding a negotiated solution to the conflict in Ukraine. However, Moscow has said it has nothing to convey to the participants of this peace summit in Switzerland. In fact, Moscow insists that this summit has nothing to do with peace because the goal, Moscow says, is not to find a negotiated solution simply for the reason that Russia is not present and has never been invited, but instead to galvanize once again the public opinion, the public attention to the conflict in Ukraine, as well as it has been described by the Kremlin as a ploy to distract the public attention from the real cause and effect of the conflict in Ukraine. Moscow has also insisted that it hopes there would be another conference on the negotiated solution for the conflict in Ukraine that would be more representative, meaning that Russia would also be a participant of this conference. But so far, we've heard Moscow saying that this conference in Switzerland is unlikely to yield any sort of results, simply because Russia is not represented. Russian initiatives have not been taken into account, as well as the initiative of the Russian president that has been most recently voiced by Vladimir Putin and stipulates the withdrawal of the Ukrainian troops from the 4 territories that Russia now claims as its own.
Dasha, also ahead of the conference, we saw that Putin had laid out his terms for a ceasefire in Ukraine. We've seen how the US has announced aid today for Ukraine. So practically speaking, what are the expectations from the peace summit, considering that neither Ukraine nor Russia is ready to give up the fight, and Russia, like you said, has not even been invited?
Well, Well, the expectation is that it would launch the process of finding a negotiated solution. That's according to the officials in the West. They do not expect that there would be some sort of resolution of the conflict immediately, but their hope is that it will help to find at least some basis to begin the negotiations with Russia. Having said that, an interesting thing here is that Russia has always been insisting that it is open for the negotiations with Ukraine, but Ukraine itself has ruled this possibility out by taking the law in Ukraine which prohibits the current authorities to have any sort of peace negotiations with current Moscow authorities. So the expectation is that it could actually start the process of bridging the positions. At the same time, the Russian ambassador to Denmark, for instance, has said that this peace conference is not bringing peace closer to this conflict, but instead is making it further away. And the military aid and the financial aid to Ukraine that has been announced by the US and including by Kamala Harris have all been met very critically in Russia. Maria Zakharova, Russian Foreign Ministry's spokesperson, has said that she wonders for what sort of humanitarian projects this money would be used to, saying is the demolition of the monuments to Alexander Pushkin, Russia's a poet, or any sort of other humanitarian initiative that would be vanquishing the Russian history and Russian trace in the Ukrainian culture.
Also, Dasha, like you said, Russia has been maintaining that there's no point in this summit at all. But will Russia at the same time be watching the developments carefully and intently to see how much support Ukraine is able to garner in Switzerland at the end of it?
Absolutely. We know for certain that Moscow is closely monitoring all sorts of developments around Ukraine. And Moscow insists that the countries of the global south are also interested because one way or another, the Russian officials have all said that this conflict is having a direct impact on the international community, on the entire international community. And it is also having an impact on the security architecture in Eurasia, with Moscow saying that it's not only important to find the negotiated solution to Ukraine, but also to find a real ground to rebuild the security architecture in Eurasia. And the Russian president, along with his initiative in terms of the withdrawal of the Ukrainian troops from Ukraine, has also laid the proposal to actually start the conversation on the security architecture reconstruction in Eurasia. And that could be, according to him, based on the organizations that are already functioning, and those include the Shanghai Security Cooperation Organization. Those also include ASEAN. There are many organizations in Eurasia that could be part of that. And obviously, the developments around Ukraine are all closely watched because they are watched as the process of the wider nature, that is the creation of the multipolar world order.
We'll leave it at that. Dasha reporting from Moscow. And we're now joined by Arvind Gupta, former senior diplomat and former deputy NSA. Mr. Gupta, such a pleasure to have you. Is Ukraine looking for more support from the summit, like we were discussing with Dasha, and hence some pressure building on Moscow, which has the momentum on the battlefield currently?
Well, I think Moscow is under no pressure. They are doing well on the battlefield. And President Putin, a few days ago, gave out his own 4 points, which essentially mean that Ukraine should concede the territories which it has lost to Russia, and it should withdraw its troops from Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporozhye, etc. So Russia is quite confident that it has an edge on the battlefield, and at the same time the war seems to be continuing, and the West, despite the Ukrainian losses, is egging Ukraine on to continue fighting the war, which it seems to be losing. So this is in some sense a beginning of a process which, if carried out honestly, will lead to some kind of a realistic assessment. I hope it does lead to that kind of an assessment, and then paves the way for a long path to peace if it happens. But right now, I think the battlefield, what happens on the battlefield, that is ultimately what's going to decide the future of this.
Right. Mr. Gupta, what do you make of the attendance at the summit, Biden's absence and China's non-participation?
I think there are not too many high expectations from the summit, even amongst those who are attending it. That's why it is being said, even by Zelensky himself and by the Swiss hosts, that this is a path towards a roadmap to a future settlement. This is really a peace summit which is being held to support Zelensky, who last year had come out with a 10-point peace formula, which he presented to the rest of the world, which itself was a sequel to an earlier meeting that was held in Jeddah in 2022, which was attended by about 40 countries. So this is a process, but in the end, I think this will show how Zelensky, what kind of a support Zelensky has, and what kind of assessment the international community makes. So the world will be looking with great interest to any joint statement that might emerge from this conference, and that might give some pointers to the future evolution of this conflict. But it is true that the conflict has gone on for a long time. There have been huge losses on both sides. Ukraine particularly has suffered massive losses, and its ability to continue to fight is also now under question. So the conflict should come to an end, and because this has had a global impact as well. So from that point of view, I think a beginning of a process should be welcomed. That's why I think India is India is participating in this process at some level. But expectations from this specific conference are not too high. But it should not be wished away also, because some indicators for the future course of action might emerge.
Also, Mr. Gupta, like you said, India is participating. So you would remember that PM Modi met the President of Ukraine in Italy, and India's Secretary West in the Ministry of External Affairs is participating. How do you see India's position and participation?
I think Prime Minister Modi made it quite clear to Zelensky. The fact that he met him, there is a good chemistry between the two leaders. But India has said many times, and this was repeated during Modi-Zelensky meeting, that India would like this conflict to be resolved by dialogue and diplomacy. And so that's where it is. I think India has taken a principled position. Modi also said that it will support any peaceful resolution. But India has not taken any major overt initiative, I think, to resolve the conflict. So they have repeated their earlier principled position, and which is how it is.
We'll leave it at that, Mr. Gupta. Pleasure to have you on the show on the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland and India's participation at the level of Secretary West in the MEA in it. A high-level U.S. delegation, including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is set to travel to India next week and meet Tibetan spiritual leader Dalai Lama in Dharamshala. The Republican chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, is leading the bipartisan congressional delegation to India. In a press release of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman McCaul stated that India is the world's largest democracy and an important strategic partner of the United States, and he looks forward to meeting with government officials and American business community to learn how to continue and strengthen the relationship with India. India has formally started cost negotiations with the French delegation for the procurement of 26 Rafale marine aircraft that will operate from its 2 aircraft carriers, as per highly placed sources in India's Ministry of Defence. The approximate cost of the 26 naval Rafale jets is expected to be around 40,000 to 50,000 crore Indian rupees. That's dependent on the negotiations between the Indian and French sides. This will include the cost of the aircraft, besides missiles and maintenance of the aircraft, According to sources, the Indian side had invited the French side for the negotiations process and the first round of talks. The French side includes Defence Ministry and industry partners including Dassault Aviation and Thales. The focus of the Government of India is likely to be to ensure that the government-to-government contract is signed within this fiscal itself for timely delivery of the much-needed Rafale Marines for India's aircraft carriers, INS Vikrant and INS Vikramaditya, which currently operate MiG-29Ks for carrier-based operations. 14 people died on Saturday after a passenger vehicle fell into a gorge in Rudraprayag district of the northern Indian state of Uttarakhand. 7 passengers were seriously injured and admitted to AIIMS hospital in Rishikesh, where 2 people died during treatment. Other passengers are undergoing treatment at Rudraprayag District Hospital. President Draupadi Murmu, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Union Home Minister Amit Shah and other leaders have expressed grief over the accident. Uttarakhand Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami has ordered the district magistrate to investigate the accident and issued necessary guidelines for better treatment of the injured. Chief Minister Dhami announced financial assistance of 2 lakh Indian rupees each to the dependents of the deceased. With an aim to provide crucial income support to the country's farmers by offering them an annual financial benefit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to release the 17th installment of the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme on 18th June. In this regard, farmers across the country have expressed gratitude. Listen in.
PM Modi is a nice man. We are happy that we will be getting the 17th installment under PM Kisan scheme. We are getting several benefits after he assumed charge of Prime Minister. We are very happy that PM Modi signed the file of 17th installment of Kisan scheme immediately after assuming the charge for 3rd time. We will be benefited from this installment, so we are thankful to PM Modi.
Let's now take a look at other stories making news. 8 Naxalites and 1 soldier of the Special Task Force were killed in an encounter in Chhattisgarh's Narayanpur district on Saturday. 2 other STF personnel also sustained injuries in the incident. A huge cache of weapons and other materials were recovered from the encounter site. Fuel prices in Karnataka increased by 3 rupees after the state government hiked the sales tax on petrol and diesel on 15th June. BJP held a protest against water crisis near Delhi Minister Atishi's office on Saturday. The national capital is reeling under a water crisis due to scorching heat wave and rising temperatures. Time for another breather, still to come on DD India News Hour. Kate, the Princess of Wales, makes her first public appearance since cancer diagnosis at Trooping the Colour. India's last group match against Canada in ICC Men's T20 World Cup has been abandoned due to wet outfield. Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour with me, Munmun Bhattacharya. The 18th edition of the Mumbai International Film Festival has kicked off with a 7-day extravaganza featuring documentaries, short films and animation films as well. DD India correspondent Shyama Mishra gives us a sneak peek into how MIFF unfolded in the city of dreams, Mumbai.
The 18th Mumbai International Film Festival began in the City of Dreams with much fanfare. At the 18th edition, Dr. L. Murugan, the Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, honored the illustrious wildlife filmmaker Subbiana Limattu with the much coveted V. Shantaram Lifetime Achievement Award. He congratulated Nalamuthu for winning the prestigious award this edition. MIFF conferred the award upon Sibiya Nalamuthu in recognition of his remarkable contributions to the realm of wildlife filmmaking.
This 18th Mumbai International Film Festival is a very important film festival worldwide. This film festival is every 2 years is happening in Mumbai. So this year our not only Mumbai we are screening, so almost 1,000 screening, 1,000 movies are entry received from the world. Almost 38 countries they are participating, 59 language movies, these short movies, documentary movies and animation movies are registered, and these are also our juries, international juries, national juries. They are also watching and they are also screening.
The festival witnessed enthralling performances by Sri Lankan troupe at the opening ceremony. The FTIF film Sunflowers Were the First Ones to Know was also screened at the inaugural ceremony. The short film won the award of the best film in La Sinif section at the 77th Cannes Film Festival. Earlier, the red carpet of the opening film Billy and Molly, an author love story, was organized at film festival venue at NFDC, FD Pedder Road.
We're actually delighted that the film was chosen to open the Mumbai International Film Festival this year, the 18th edition. And we hope that audiences will love it and will connect with the story and Molly's journey as much as we have.
MIFF will have 314 films from 59 countries in 61 languages, 8 world premieres, 5 international premieres, 18 Asia premieres and 21 India premieres. This year's festival is introducing the first ever doc film bazaar, a dedicated marketplace for independent filmmakers to find buyers, sponsors and collaborators for their projects. With Kirat Chawla, Shyama Mishra's report for DD India.
And now all the updates on the upcoming International Day of Yoga, which will be celebrated on the 21st of June. Yoga camps are being organized across the northwestern Indian state of Rajasthan ahead of the International Yoga Day on 21st June. A yoga camp was organized at the Chitrakoot Stadium in Jaipur city, where a large number of people, including Minister Colonel Rajwardhan Singh Rathore and Mayor of Jaipur Soumya Gurjar, participated in yoga sessions. A certificate course on yoga therapy has been launched by Faculty of Indigenous Medicine of the University of Colombo. The announcement comes as the world gears up for the 10th International Day of Yoga. Faculty of Indigenous Medicine promotes yoga as a means of wellness. Meanwhile, the High Commission of India in Sri Lanka is observing a 10-day-long Yoga Mahotsav celebration. Britain's King Charles attended the Trooping the Colour parade to honour him on his official birthday in London on Saturday. The Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, joined the parade, and this marked her first public appearance 5 months after surgery revealed the presence of cancer. The Trooping the Colour parade is an annual event that marks the official birthday of the British sovereign. This event has been taking place for over 260 years. Time now for all the sports action. India's last group match at the ICC Men's T20 World Cup against Canada has been called off due to wet outfield at Florida on Saturday. The Super 8 phase of the tournament will be held in West Indies. India will enter the Super 8s unbeaten and will take on Afghanistan on the 20th of June. Germany thumped Scotland 5-1 in the Euro 2024 tournament opener, with the host nation scoring 3 goals in the first half. The Germans scored through Florian Wirtz's, Jamal Musiala and Kai Havertz's penalty before Niklas Füllkrug and Emre Can added 2 more late in the second half. Scotland got on the score sheet in the 87th minute. The host nation hunts for a record 4th European title and the first major trophy after a decade. Germany next face Hungary on Wednesday before taking on Switzerland in the final Group A match. That's it in this edition of DD India News Hour, but do share your thoughts with us on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Manu Bhattacharya. From all of us in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.
Check.